The movie begins with video footage of a woman who is in distress. She is a woman with a slim build, cropped brown hair, and is aged in her mid to late 20s. She cries and speaks directly to the camera and says that if something happens, then it is not her. Her eyes look full of fear and sorrow as she tries to battle something that we are not aware of. She says that she is no longer in control. The distraught woman looks down in silence for a few seconds and then brings a knife up to her neck and seems to fight with the urge to cut her own throat. Eventually, she brings the knife back down and lowers her face out of sight, crying with the exhaustion of the internal battle she just experienced. The woman then lifts her head and says despairingly, "It won't let me do it." What could have possibly happened to this woman to make her feel this level of despair and helplessness? The movie then goes back in time to explain how all of this began. There is a flashback of the woman, whose name is Molly, on her wedding day when she marries her husband, Tim Reynolds. The wedding was a nice relaxed family event, with many of their family and friends making toasts to their happy future. They dance and enjoy a few laughs. Molly's uncle makes a toast and talks about Molly's deceased parents and how they would be proud of their little girl. After the wedding, Molly and Tim move into Molly's childhood home that she inherited from her parents. They are so happy and bond well together in their new home. Molly has a handheld video camera that she films parts of the house with. 3 months after they move in, the house alarm blares and goes off in the middle of the night, signaling that there could be an intruder in the house. Molly wakes up and asks Tim where it is, signaling that there has been a break-in, and he lets her know it's the downstairs door near the kitchen. Molly's phone rings, and the local police have rung to ask where the break-in is. While they wait for the police to arrive, Molly is a little on edge and wants Tim to stay in the room with her, but he wants to investigate. Molly refuses to let him go alone, so she follows him. They make it down a few steps and then hear something bang downstairs. So they both run back into their room, lock their door, and wait for the sheriff. The sheriff arrives, and with a flashlight he shines a light on the back door, which is wide open. He asks if Tim locked it, and he replies that he did. The sheriff comments that there is no sign of forced entry, and then tells them to wait in their room while he does a sweep of the house. He doesn't find anyone though. Before the sheriff leaves, he tells them not to worry, because the door probably wasn't locked, opened slightly on its own, and then that set the alarm off. Tim apologizes for wasting the sheriff's time, and explains that because he is a truck driver, he is away a lot, so he installed the security system about a month ago. The scene jumps to some footage that Molly recorded of their house. With the camera, Molly films inside the storage room that is adjacent from her front door. Once inside, she lifts some wooden paneling up from the floor, and underneath it is an underground tunnel, and at the end is an ancient-looking stone carving of some horses and bridles. Next, things change to the present, where Molly finds out that Tim must get ready to leave that afternoon to go truck driving for work, and it's her birthday. In response, Molly sulks and reminds him it is her birthday, and she doesn't like being left alone in the house. Tim doesn't know what to do, but he promises to make it up to her. Molly doesn't engage with Tim for the rest of the morning and leaves for her work too. Later, during a break at work, Molly feels guilty for how cold she treated Tim before he left for working away, and she leaves him a sweet voicemail message to apologize and to say thank you to him for working so hard for them. After Molly finishes work in the evening, she invites her sister Hannah over. Hannah is a addict, and Molly is a recovering addict. Most likely due to Molly feeling sorry for herself that she doesn't get to spend her birthday with Tim, she asks Hannah to smoke. Hannah is very hesitant at first, and tells Molly she really shouldn't take any, but Molly insists. Hannah reluctantly hands her the smoke, and then after a few seconds asks for it back, and warns her not to do any more. Molly reminds her sister of how their mother tried so hard to leave the house she is now in before she passed. Hannah suddenly gets an alert on her phone, and she must leave Molly. Molly doesn't want to be alone, but she hugs her sister goodbye. After her sister leaves, she sets the alarm system, and then looks at the storage room door, opens it so it is slightly open, and peers her head in. She looks at a wall with several photos of someone going over jumps on horses. Molly sees a photo of someone who must be her dad, but she becomes overwhelmed quickly and shuts the door again. Molly sleeps for a while, but is woken up by a strange noise. She warily heads downstairs with a baseball bat, and as she peers through the front door, there is someone on the other side, and they begin to rattle the doorknob and bash against the whole door repeatedly. Molly gets such a fright that she falls backwards, landing on her back. Molly calls the sheriff out, and he reassures her that it would probably just be kids playing pranks on her. He tells her he will come back in the morning to tell the other people in the neighborhood what is going on, and that should sort of for her. The sheriff looks really concerned for Molly, seeing the stress she is under, and asks if she will be okay. In response, she asks him if he knew her father before he died, and he says not personally, but he was called out to the house a few times. Molly tells him she doesn't remember any of that, and he tells her that it's probably best that she doesn't remember. Molly works as a cleaner with her sister Hannah, and Hannah offers Molly to stay with her and her partner while Tim is away, but Molly says she can't stay with them every time she gets scared. Molly then asks Hannah if she can have more weed, and Hannah vehemently says no, that she can't even get any at the moment. Molly becomes angry with Hannah, not believing her excuse, and walks away from her. Molly is really struggling with being alone in the house, and calls Tim to tell him how she feels and that maybe it was a mistake that they moved in. She tells him she wants him back home, and he comforts her by telling her to get some sleep. Molly wakes up in the middle of the night, and she hears the voice of a little girl crying. The sound gets louder as she goes towards another room and opens the door. She doesn't enter, but now the crying is loud and she holds out her hand towards the sound. Suddenly, we see some video camera footage that Molly has taken at night. She films a mother with her 2 children sitting at the kitchen table. One is a toddler and the other a little girl who is drawing. The footage stops. Tim arrives home from working away and enters the house trying to find Molly. He finds her in a room sitting on the bed, completely naked, facing away from him. Tim is puzzled and a little worried as he sits next to her and tries to understand why she is looking at the wall. Slowly, she turns her face to him and tells him he is alive. Tim takes Molly to church service, which they haven't attended for a while, and Molly hugs her sister Hannah tightly before they leave to go. Hannah reassures Molly that everything will be all right. At night, while Tim is sleeping, Molly is unable to sleep and wanders up to the attic and looks through family photos. There is a strong sense of unease as she looks at photos of her father and she begins to cry. In her arms is a small stuffed teddy bear, and in it she has hidden heavier paraphernalia and looks at it longingly. The next morning, Tim is in the kitchen making some breakfast when Molly interrupts him by kissing him passionately, and he kisses her back. They become more impassioned with each other and they have sexual intercourse on the kitchen floor. They are so distracted that the breakfast burns on the hot plate. As soon as they are finished, Tim rushes up to pour the burnt breakfast out on the ground outside, and when he comes back in, he can't find Molly anywhere. Molly's behavior is becoming more and more unpredictable. Without saying goodbye, Molly starts work, and her boss tells her she should go home as she still looks sick. Molly begs him for her to work and offers to work in the back. Her boss is surprised at this and agrees as long as she stays out of sight. While Molly's at work, she begins to hear someone speaking that is not really there, just like she does at home. Molly makes a video entry talking to the camera, saying that there is something wrong with her. She is feeling something from someone that should be impossible to feel something from. Molly seems to be talking about her deceased father, because she relates how she saw things that didn't make sense after her father left this world, but no one believed her. She makes a chilling statement that this time she is going to show everyone. One night, the voice of Molly's deceased father calls up to her from the bottom of the stairs, and Molly is awake and on guard with her video camera, ready to film what is going on. On the footage, a man walking up the stairs can be heard, and then he rattles the doorknob repeatedly. The door creaks open, and Molly breathes heavily, trying to control her fear. The door slams shut, which frightens her. And then this time the door opens wide by itself, and Molly begins crying and asking why this is happening. Then it slams shut again. When Molly returns to work, before she clocks in, her boss pulls her into his office and says they need to talk. Molly is shown footage of herself in the back of the store in the hallway, pulling her pants down and appearing to move and be pushed against the wall as if someone is forcefully and aggressively having sexual intercourse with her, except no one is there. Molly breaks down crying, telling Mr. Henderson to stop it immediately. Mr. Henderson is very confused and disturbed, and asks Molly what in the world she was doing. Molly does nothing but cry. However, when she looks up at him, she starts to laugh bitterly and become instantly angry with rage, telling Mr. Henderson there is no way she knows who is touching her in the hallway so aggressively. She tells him sarcastically that it is a mystery. Her voice is raised at this point, and Mr. Henderson tells her to calm down and get out. Next, we see Hannah driving in the car with Molly, and she tells her she is going to sit down with her and figure this all out. Molly is deeply ashamed, and tells her sister she doesn't have to do that, but Hannah insists. Molly explains that Tim has called Pastor Bobby over to help her, so not to worry. The video camera is recording the mother and her 2 kids again, as the kids play in the backyard. Near the end of the footage, the little girl looks directly at the video camera and stares. The footage cuts to nighttime, and Molly has filmed a deceased deer that had got its back legs caught in a barbed wire fence. Back to the present, Pastor Bobby and Molly are conversing in an easygoing manner. Molly and Pastor Bobby are drinking wine, and Molly suggests they get really drunk. Pastor Bobby is uncomfortable with this inappropriate proposition, but Molly continues to speak in a flirtatious and seductive manner. He changes the subject and tries to get her to talk about what is going on. He explains how Tim doesn't want her to start using again, and she tells him she is dealing with something not to do with the drugs. He brings up her deceased parents and she cries, but then breaks into a laugh and changes the subject to continue to flirt with Pastor Bobby, asking him very personal questions. Pastor Bobby watches in great discomfort as Molly touches herself, and he leaves the house in a hurry. Molly is left behind in the house alone, and she is using hard drugs again. Under the influence, Molly bursts into Hannah's house at night and paces up and down. Hannah tells her son to go to his room, and she tries to understand Molly. Molly tells Hannah that he is following her everywhere, and Hannah asks if it is the same as last time. Molly begs for her not to put her away again. There is camera footage again of Molly filming the mother who has the 2 children. This time she is filming her at her place of work, and filming as she leaves and goes to her car. Tim comes home from work and calls Molly repeatedly. He can smell a horrid smell, and on the kitchen table for anyone to see is her paraphernalia. At dinner, Tim queries what the bad smell is, because he looked all over the house but couldn't find anything, but it smells to him like something is deceased. That night, Tim gets up to go to the toilet, and then sees Molly has gotten up while he was in the bathroom. He goes downstairs to see where she is, and finds her holding the video camera and talking to someone that is not there. She is very emotional, and because she says they both loved him and can't believe he did those things, he realizes she is talking to her late father. Molly sees Tim standing half hidden and calls him. Tim is frightened and tries to ask her what she is doing, but is overcome with the horrible stench of something that is deceased. It takes his breath away. As he enters the kitchen, Molly introduces him to her father, but there is no one there. There is the sound of flies and Tim can't handle the smell. She starts to yell at her father, calling him a coward, and asks him why he will not show himself to anyone else, only her. Tim pulls her out of the room and back to bed and calms her. Tim takes her to the hospital to see a doctor, who sees nothing wrong with her except that she is tired. He prescribes her pills, and Tim doesn't feel much better. He asks what to do if they don't work, and she continues to talk about her father. The doctor suggests a psychiatric doctor if that happens. Tim is clearly frightened and asks him what happens if she becomes dangerous. That night, Tim asks Molly if she wants to take her pills, as they both sit in the lounge watching TV. She doesn't respond. Some time later, as Tim is feeling extremely tired, he looks over with relief to see that Molly is asleep. He puts a blanket on her, and he goes upstairs to bed. Tim is woken up with a fright as he hears Molly scream and run up the stairs to him. She shuts the door behind her, panic-stricken, and tells him he is coming up the stairs. She has her video camera and films out the window, asking if Tim can hear him. He is now running around outside. Tim tries to tell her there is nobody there, but he walks out of the door as if to go look for him. Molly shuts the door after him. He tells her he is coming back in. He finds Molly hiding in the closet holding the camera. Tim tells her to stop recording, and then in frustration, snatches it from her. He cuddles her, and she cries from the fear. Molly begins to kiss him, and then turns violent and bites down on his bottom lip and won't let go. Tim starts to panic and yells in pain. She eventually lets him go and runs off. Tim calls Hannah over, and she asks to look at his mouth. She tells him to go to the hospital, but he yells at her that he is fine. He is overwhelmed with what is going on with Molly, and he tells Hannah she has run off into the woods. He wants to ring the police and tells Hannah she needs psychiatric help, but Hannah disagrees, saying last time it made her worse. Hannah tells Tim to go to the hospital to get treated while she looks for Molly, and she reassures him that she will take her if he is scared. Next, we see video camera footage of the woods at night, as Molly is filming while she is hiding. Hannah sees Molly, and then Molly runs back to the house and goes down to the basement. As soon as Hannah follows her down there, she is overcome with a bad stench of something that is deceased. As she goes down the steps and enters the basement, she sees Molly stabbing something in the ceiling with a screwdriver. Blood is everywhere and Hannah is in shock. A deer breaks through the ceiling and is covered in maggots. Molly leans all over it, and then looks at Hannah crying, telling Hannah that Hannah did it. She ended their father's life. Later on, Hannah has the phone ready to ring the police, but she can't bring herself to do it. She walks into the room that Molly is lying in, and explains that she tried her best to protect Molly from their father after their mother passed, but she couldn't be there all the time. She tells Molly that he promised that he had stopped, but he never did. Hannah asks Molly to come stay with her and Peter for a while. Molly says she can't because their father will hurt Peter and slit his throat like a fish. To this, Molly laughs, and Hannah realizes just how dangerous she is. Hannah walks off and leaves her there. The camera footage starts again, and this time Molly is filming the neighbor again, the mother with the two kids. This time in the living room she can see Tim and the mother engage in sexual activity. Molly calls Pastor Bobby over, and as he pulls up to her house, he sees she is standing on the front porch completely naked. He approaches her, and they become intimate. Later, Molly gets up to go to the toilet, and looks over in the bath at Pastor Bobby's body with severe bite marks all over him. Molly did it. Molly leaves a voicemail message for Hannah, warning her they will find horrible things at the house, but that it wasn't her and never was. She has no memory of doing it. Tim is making his way back home and down their street when he sees a house with dozens of police out the front. He pulls up to ask a policeman near the road what happened, but all he will say is that someone was reported missing, and then tells him to move on. He arrives home and sees the video camera has been left alone, and he picks it up to view it and sees it is a recording of him having an affair with the neighbor. He trembles with the realization, and Molly walks up behind him and hits him over the head with a sharp object. He is knocked unconscious, and she pulls him along the ground and pushes him down the basement steps. When he wakes up, he says sorry, but Molly doesn't listen and pierces him through the back of the head with a screwdriver. Some time later, she cries bitterly over his body, and then changes personalities again. It's nighttime, and she walks out into the woods completely naked. The next morning, after receiving Molly's voicemail message the night before, Hannah goes over to the house and sees the family photo album open on the floor in a room with their father's face cut out of the photos. Hannah opens a door and mysteriously lifts her hand to reach out to something that is not revealed. The end.